The Hayes family lived in a yellow house at the end of Eldridge Lane. It was the kind of house people drove past, slowly. A neat lawn, white shutters, a swing on the porch that nobody sat on, but everyone meant to. Inside, 3 people, a mother, a father, a boy. The boy's name was Daniel. He was 6 years old. He had 2 front teeth too big for his face, a freckle under his left eye, and feet that never walked when they could run. His mother said he had been born in a hurry, and he had stayed that way. That Saturday in October, the house smelled like pancakes. Daniel was at the kitchen table swinging his legs because they didn't reach the floor. His mother, Claire, was at the stove. She was humming. She did that when she didn't know she was happy. Across from Daniel, his father, Mark, sat with a phone pressed to his ear. He was nodding at something nobody else could hear. He had been on that call for an hour. He would be on it for another hour. Claire put a plate in front of Daniel and tapped her son's nose with a finger covered in flour. Daniel laughed. Mark didn't look up. After breakfast, Claire said the words that would later be repeated in police interviews and never spoken at the dinner table again. "All right," she said, wiping flour from her hand. "Hide and seek. Daniel hides. Dad seeks. No peeking now, Mark." Those were the last ordinary words spoken in the house. Mark put the phone down. He smiled the way fathers smile when they're trying. He counted to 20 with his eyes closed. Daniel ran. He ran past the living room where he had hidden last time. He ran past the hall closet where he had hidden the time before that. He needed somewhere new, somewhere good, somewhere they would never think to look. The basement door was at the end of the hall. The basement was Mark's. It was where he kept his tools and the things he did not want anyone to see. There was a workbench there, and a tackle box, and along the far wall, an old chest freezer the color of dirty milk. Daniel's mother had told him more than once that the basement was not for him. That was why it was perfect. Daniel opened the door slowly. The hinges did not creak. He had been careful about that for weeks. He walked down the wooden steps in his socks. The basement smelled like cold concrete and motor oil. He could hear the freezer humming from the bottom of the stairs. He went to it. He had thought about it for a long time. He had planned. He knew the freezer was almost empty because he had watched his father carry the last of the venison up to the kitchen the week before. He knew the lid was heavy, but not too heavy. He knew that nobody would ever look there. He climbed in. The cold bit through his pajamas. He pulled his knees up to his chin. He smiled because he had done it. He had won. They were going to look for hours. He reached up and pulled the lid down over himself. It closed with a soft, final sound. The inside had no handle. There was nothing to pull. Nothing made for someone trying to get back out. Upstairs, Mark counted to 20. The first hour they laughed. "He's getting better at this," Claire said, checking the same closet for the second time. "He's hiding from a man with a college degree," Mark said. "I will find him." The second hour, they stopped laughing. The third hour, Claire's hands began to shake. She kept saying his name. She kept saying it the way you say something when you are afraid of what your own voice will sound like if it stops. They called the neighbors. They called the police. By dark, there were 6 men in the house and 3 in the yard with flashlights. They checked the closets. They checked under the beds. They checked the attic. They checked the woods behind the house. Mark stood in the kitchen with both hands flat on the counter and did not move. It was a young officer, near midnight, who went down to the basement with a flashlight and a tired apology for intruding. He saw the freezer. He stood very still for a moment, the way a person does when they already know. Then he opened it. Daniel was curled inside the way he had climbed in, knees to chin, fingers tucked under his face, eyes closed. He looked like he was sleeping. The coroner used gentle words because adults needed gentle words. The coroner did not know. In the last seconds of his small life, Daniel Hayes had been thinking one thing. Why aren't they finding me? I hid so well. They're going to be so proud. They buried him on a Tuesday. Claire put a small stuffed rabbit in the casket before they closed it. Daniel had slept with it every night since he was 2 years old. Its left ear was chewed flat. Its eyes were 2 black buttons. She kissed its head before she let it go. She did not see the rabbit again. Not for a long time. The first week, the house was full of people. Claire's sister came. Mark's brother came. The neighbors came with casseroles in glass dishes and apologies they had practiced in the car. They sat on the couch, where Daniel had built forts. They drank coffee from the mugs Daniel had picked out at the grocery store because they had cartoon dinosaurs on them. Claire smiled at all of them. She thanked them. She walked them to the door. When the last of them left on Sunday night, she stood in the front hall with her hand still on the doorknob and did not move for a long time. The Monday after the funeral, Mark went back to work. He said it was better than sitting in the house. He said the office was quiet. He said a lot of things in those first weeks, and Claire stopped listening to most of them. He came home late. He ate, standing up at the counter. He slept on his side of the bed, with his back to her, and she lay awake listening to him breathe and wondered when he had become a stranger. She did not blame him. She was a stranger to herself. She kept Daniel's room exactly the way he had left it. The bed was unmade. A green sock was on the floor by the dresser. There was a half-finished drawing on his small desk, a picture of a dog with too many legs. She did not touch any of it. She closed the door, and she opened it, and she closed it again, sometimes 10 times in an hour. The first sound came on a Tuesday. She was in the kitchen washing a single plate. The radio was on, low, through the radio, under it, behind it. She heard something else, a giggle. It was small and quick and gone before she could be sure it had been there. She turned the radio off. She stood in the silence, with water running over her hands. She told herself it was the pipes. The house was old. The pipes did things in the cold. She told herself this for a long time. The second sound came 3 nights later. She was in bed. Mark was asleep beside her, breathing slowly. The house was quiet the way old houses are never quiet, full of small clicks and shifts. And then, from the hallway, very clearly, she heard footsteps, small footsteps, the pattern she would have known anywhere. Heel, toe, heel, toe. The little hop he always did at the threshold of his bedroom. Claire sat up. She did not breathe. She listened until the house was quiet again, and then she listened longer. In the morning, she did not tell Mark. The third week, she began to leave Daniel's door open. She did not know why. She told herself it was so the room would not feel forgotten. She told herself it was so the air would move through. None of it was true. The truth was that she was waiting. The first time she saw him, it was almost morning. She had not slept. She had been lying in the dark with her eyes open for hours, and somewhere around 4 she had gotten up and walked down the hall in her bare feet. The hallway was cold. The door to Daniel's room was open the way she had left it. He was sitting on the edge of his bed. His back was to her. He was small and still, in the blue pajamas they had buried him in. His hair stuck up at the back the way it always had. He was holding something in his lap, and after a long moment Claire realized what it was. The rabbit. She had put that rabbit in the casket with her own hands. She had pressed it against his chest. She had felt the casket lid under her fingers when they closed it. She made a sound. It was not a word. It was the sound a person makes when their body knows something their mind has not yet agreed to. The boy on the bed did not turn around. He tilted his head. Just a little. The way Daniel did when he was listening. Claire ran. She ran back down the hall and into her own bedroom and got into bed and pulled the covers up to her chin and lay there shaking until the sun came up. Mark slept through all of it. He left for work at 7 without speaking to her. She did not go into Daniel's room that day. She did not go in the next day either. On the third day, she went in. The bed was made, not perfectly, the way a child makes a bed. The pillow was crooked. The blanket was pulled up but not tucked. The rabbit was sitting in the middle of the pillow. Claire knelt down beside the bed and picked the rabbit up and held it to her face and breathed in. It smelled like him. It smelled exactly like him. Like the back of his neck after a bath. Like the soap she had stopped buying. She sat on the floor of her dead son's bedroom and she cried for a very long time. When she stopped crying, she said his name out loud. Daniel. The closet door clicked. It was a small, ordinary sound, a latch settling. It was not the sound of a door opening, but it was an answer. She went into the room every day after that. In the beginning, she only sat. She brought a book she did not read. She sat in the small chair by the window and she waited. And sometimes she heard small sounds. A giggle from the closet, a footstep in the corner, the soft creak of the bed springs as if something small had sat down. She never saw him, not for weeks. She talked to him. She talked about her day. She talked about the weather. She read him the books he had loved. The ones with the pictures of bears in waistcoats and rabbits with umbrellas. Sometimes, when she finished a page, she heard him giggle. He was always behind her when he giggled. She never turned around fast enough to see. She told herself she was being patient. She told herself he was shy now, the way he had never been in life. She told herself 100 things. And the things she told herself got further and further away from what any other person would have called the truth. She stopped sleeping in her bedroom. She started sleeping in the chair in his. The first time she saw him fully, he was standing in the doorway. It was evening. The hall light was on behind him. He was a small black shape against the yellow. She did not move. He did not move. After a long time, he came into the room. He walked the way he had always walked, with the little hop, with the heel toe. He climbed into his bed. He pulled the covers up. He picked up the rabbit and tucked it under his chin. He looked at her. His eyes were the color his eyes had been. His mouth moved like a mouth. "Mama," he said. The word was almost right. Almost. There was a pause in it that should not have been there. A small gap, as if the word had been learned and not remembered. As if someone had heard a recording of a child saying "mama" and was now repeating it back, very carefully, for an audience of one. Claire did not hear the gap. Claire heard her son. She crossed the room in 3 steps and she got into the bed beside him and she held him. He was cold. He was so cold that her arms ached where they touched him. She held him anyway. She held him until the sun came up. And when the sun came up, he was not there anymore, and the sheets where he had been were dry, and there was no warmth in them, and there had never been any warmth in them. The rabbit was on the pillow. Claire smiled. That was the morning everything changed. She went downstairs. She made breakfast. She made enough for 3. She set 3 places at the table. She put a glass of orange juice at the small chair where Daniel always sat. The juice was still there at noon. It was still there at 3. She threw it out before Mark came home. When Mark came into the kitchen the next morning and saw the 3rd place at the table, he stopped. He looked at her. She smiled at him. It was a real smile. It was the smile he had not seen on her face in 2 months. "He likes pancakes," she said. Mark sat down. He picked up his fork. He did not say anything. He ate his breakfast, and he went to work, and he did not say anything. He told himself she needed time. He told himself she would be better soon. He told himself this for a long time, the same way she had told herself about the pipes. The weeks that followed were, by every visible measure, the happiest weeks of Claire Hayes's life. She hummed in the kitchen again. She bought groceries, small boxes of cereal with cartoon characters on them, juice boxes, the kind of cheese sticks Daniel had liked. She set the table for 3. She read bedtime stories to an empty bed. Except that the bed was not empty. Except that when she leaned down to kiss the small forehead on the pillow, her lips came away cold and slightly damp, and she did not notice, and she did not notice, and she did not notice. Sometimes in the kitchen she would say something funny, and from the next room she would hear a giggle. The giggle was always a moment too late. She did not notice that either. Mark noticed only what he could survive noticing. Mark was at work. Mark was on calls. Mark came home at 9 and 8, standing up at the counter, and went to bed. He saw his wife humming. He saw her smiling. He saw the 3rd plate at the table, and he told himself it was a phase. The way you tell yourself a bruise is nothing. The way you tell yourself the noise in the engine will go away on its own. He did not go into Daniel's room. He had not gone into Daniel's room since the funeral. If he had, he would have seen the small indentation on the pillow where something had been resting. He would have seen the rabbit sitting up, watching the door. He would have seen, on the floor by the bed, 2 small, wet footprints, the size of a 6-year-old's feet that had not been there an hour before. But he did not go in. Once, only once, he had stood outside that door with his hand on the knob. He had stood there a long time. He had not turned it, and the house, by every visible measure, was happy again. It was a Thursday in January when Mark heard his wife laughing. He had come home early. He had not meant to. A meeting had been cancelled, and he had sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes before he started the car, because the idea of going home had become a thing he had to talk himself into. When he opened the front door, the house was warm. Something was on the stove. From upstairs he heard Claire's voice. She was speaking softly, the way a person speaks to a child. And under her voice, faint. He heard another voice answer, a small voice, a child's voice. Mark stood in the front hall with his keys in his hand and did not move for a long time. He told himself it was the television. He told himself it was the radio. He told himself, finally, that he should go upstairs. The hallway upstairs was longer than he remembered. He walked it slowly. The door to Daniel's room was open, and a soft yellow light came out of it, and he could hear them clearly now. His wife, and the small voice. And the small voice was laughing. He stopped at the doorway. Claire was sitting on the floor by the bed. Her back was to the door. She was leaning forward, her hands cupped around something he could not see, and she was smiling, and she was saying his name. "Daniel, Daniel, look. Look what Mama brought you." The thing on the bed had its back to the door. It was small. It was the right size. It was wearing the blue pajamas they had buried him in, and its hair stuck up in the back. And it was holding the rabbit, and from where Mark stood, in the doorway, with the light behind him, it looked exactly like his son. It tilted its head, the way Daniel had tilted his head. Mark could not breathe. The thing on the bed turned around. Half of it was Daniel, the small boy with the 2 front teeth that were too big and the freckle under his left eye. The other half was only trying to be. The skin did not sit right. One eye was open too wide, and did not blink when the other eye blinked. The mouth on that side smiled a moment after the rest of the face did, the way the giggle had always been a moment too late, as if it had forgotten when a smile was supposed to happen. The thing on the bed smiled at him. Some part of Mark's mind, the part that paid the bills and answered emails, kept trying to make the face make sense. It could not. The face was a face the way a mask was a face. The face was a face the way a photograph of his son was his son. Mark did not make a sound. The animal part of him knew that making a sound would be the last thing he ever did. He kept his face still. He kept his hands at his sides. He breathed through his nose, slowly, the way you breathe when something is in the grass near your foot. Claire turned around. She looked at him over her shoulder and she smiled, and the smile was the smile of his wife. "He's been waiting for you," she said. Mark made his voice work. "Claire," he said, "come downstairs. I made coffee." It was a stupid thing to say. He had not made coffee. He could not have made coffee. But she stood up. She came to the door. She kissed him on the cheek as she passed, and her lips were warm, and she walked down the hall toward the stairs, humming. The thing on the bed watched her go. Then it looked at Mark. Mark closed the door. In the kitchen, he tried. He told her what he had seen. He told her, slowly, with his hands flat on the table so they would not shake, that the thing in their son's room was not their son. He told her about the face. He told her about the wrong smile. He told her she had to listen to him. "Please, please, please listen." Claire smiled at him the whole time. When he was done, she reached across the table and took his hand. Her fingers were cold, colder than they should have been. "You're tired," she said. "You work too hard." "Claire, that is not Daniel." She did not stop smiling. "That is not our son." "I know," she said. It was not what he had expected her to say. It stopped him the way a misstep stops you, your whole body lurching for ground that isn't there. "I know it is not him," she said it gently, the way you explain something simple to someone who is frightened. "But he is here, and Daniel is not." "Claire, if I hold this one long enough," she said, "if I love him long enough, if I call him by his name long enough, maybe one day he will be." "That is not how it works." "It is how it has to work." He shook his head. He wanted to shout. He wanted to drag her up out of the chair and out of the house and into the car and onto a road going anywhere else. But the words would not come and his hands would not move. And it was like trying to reach someone through thick glass. Then she said it. She said it without cruelty, which was the worst part. She said it the way you say a thing that is simply true, a thing you both already know, a thing he had somehow been too slow to understand. "You lost him once," she said. She paused. "I didn't." She took her hand back. She stood. She kissed the top of his head, the way you kiss a child who has had a long day, and she walked out of the kitchen, and he heard her go up the stairs, and he heard the door of Daniel's room close softly behind her. Mark sat at the table. He did not follow her. He would tell himself afterward that this was the moment he failed her, not the freezer, not the search, not the funeral. Here, this table, this kitchen. He should have stood up. He should have gone after her. He should have made her hear him. He did not, because part of him, a small part, a tired part, a part he would spend the rest of his life trying not to look at, was glad she was not crying anymore. The house was quiet for a while. Then, through the floor, he heard it. The small voice, the one with the gap in it. "Mama," it said. "Why didn't you find me?" Mark closed his eyes. He waited for his wife to scream. He waited for her to come down the stairs with her face broken open, the way it had broken open in the parking lot 2 months ago, when the young officer walked toward him very slowly. She did not scream. What he heard instead was worse. He heard her answer it. He heard her voice, soft and warm and certain. The voice she had used for bedtimes and skinned knees and bad dreams. The voice of a mother who has finally found the child she lost. He could not make out the words. He did not want to. He did not go upstairs. That night, something happened in Daniel's room. Mark never told anyone what. He could not because he did not see it. He only heard it. A long, slow breath let out. Then the sound of a body settling onto a small bed. Then nothing at all. In the morning, he found her. She was lying in Daniel's bed. The blankets were pulled up to her chin. Her hands were folded on top of them. Her eyes were closed. She was smiling. She looked like she was sleeping. She was not. Beside her, in the narrow bed, there was a small hollow pressed into the mattress, the shape of someone smaller who had lain down next to her in the night. The hollow was still warm. Mark left the house that day. He did not pack. He did not call anyone. He did not lock the door behind him. There did not seem to be any point. He got into his car and he drove until the road ran out, and then he found a town he had never heard of, and he stopped there. He never went back. He knew the way people sometimes know things without being told, that something was still in that house, that it had not left, that it was sitting in the cold and the dark, patient, exactly where it had always been, still waiting, still hungry for the things his wife had been giving it, her smiles, her pancakes, her voice through a closed door, her cold, folded hands. It would wait. It was good at waiting. Years later, the yellow house at the end of Eldridge Lane was sold. A new family moved in on a bright afternoon. A mother, a father, and a little girl who was 6 years old. She loved the house right away. She loved the yard. She loved her room. She even loved the basement, though her mother told her more than once that the basement was not for her. 2 weeks after they moved in, on a Saturday in October, soft rain began to fall against the windows. The little girl came into the kitchen. "Mom," she said, "I'm bored." Her mother smiled and put down her cup. "What do you want to do?" The girl shrugged, in the way children do when they already know the answer. "Hide and seek." Her mother knelt down in front of her. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her daughter's ear. "All right," she said. "I'll hide you somewhere your father will never find you." The girl laughed. Then she ran off. Down in the basement, behind the old white chest freezer that no one had ever bothered to throw away, in the cold, dark space between the wall and the box. Something laughed too. A small laugh. A patient one. The kind a child makes when, after a very long time, someone is finally coming to find them.